Good evening. I have a strange relationship to New York City. I was born there and spent the first most formative years of my life being pushed around a stroller, going to museums, playing in Central Park. So, because all of my core memories were formed in this great city, New York, when I visit it, it feels like home. The smell of piss, the sound of honking and construction, the volume, the pace everyone walks at. It's all so familiar. And yet, I don't know my way around. I get disoriented. I feel lost and look like a tourist. And in New York, that's the last thing you want to look like. I imagine it's what it must feel like to have dementia or Alzheimer's or something. I know this place, but I don't know it at all. Nothing has made me feel more disconnected from my birth city than the recent mayoral election. So, tonight we're going to talk about New York City, what it represents, and why so many people are fixated on Zoran Mandani with a resident of New York, Inez Stepman. This is Real America with me, Bridget Phetasy. From where we sit right now, unless the polls are completely wrong, which they might be, it looks like Zoran, an avowed socialist, is probably going to win to be mayor of New York. This confuses me because when I think of New York City, I think of an entire city of millions of hustlers, not people looking for handouts per se. As Jay-Z said, and since I made it here, I can make it anywhere. And this has been the beacon of hope and the promise of America. The melting pot of millions pulling themselves up by the bootstraps, fighting, striving for a better life. And that is why I care who their mayor is. But why does the media care? Why do you, if you do? Maybe you don't. Why do other Americans? What other city draws this sort of attention? What other city's mayor even gets this kind of focus unless their city is burning down, Karen Bass? Does it say something about America that Mamdani is the front runner for this race? New York has always captivated the imaginations of people all over the world. Two of its many nicknames are the capital of the world and the center of the universe. George Washington was in New York when he got a copy of the Declaration of Independence, 5 days after it was published. Every inch of the city feels iconic. The Statue of Liberty, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Empire State Building, Grand Central Station, Broadway, Coney Island, watching the Macy's Day Parade on Thanksgiving, watching the ball drop on New Year's Eve. Madison Square Garden is where Marilyn Monroe horny sang to JFK, where John Lennon played his final show, where the Ali Frazier fight went down. The spectacle of New York is so big that it's hard to capture. Times Square would leave the Romans and Egyptians speechless. If a caveman time traveled to that skyline, he'd drop dead into a hot dog cart and everyone would step around him because they'd just assume he was another homeless guy. Every one of us, just like so many people all around the world, grew up seeing New York City everywhere on t-shirts, commercials, toys, movies. New York directors have captured it so well. Woody Allen, Martin Scorsese, Spike Lee, Sidney Pollack. It's a hallmark of comedy. Saturday Night Live, The Chappelle Show, Seinfeld, Friends, Sex and the City, Taxi, Will and Grace, I Love Lucy, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Jeffersons, 30 Rock, The Daily Show, late night shows. It's on and on. It's a hub for journalism and sports, fashion, art, and food. The music. Oh, the music. Leonard Bernstein, Beastie Boys, Talking Heads, Billy Joel, Neil Diamond, Wu Tang Clan, The Velvet Underground, Nas. New York gave us hip hop. It gave us punk. It also, the UK, I'm not leaving you out. It's a famous city filled with famous people. Even the OG Superman, Christopher Reeve, was a New Yorker. Donald Trump, the most famous man alive right now, is a living expression of New York City. So much of Trump is a result of New York City. And New York has got scars deeper than most cities. 9/11, COVID, the Wall Street crash, Son of Sam. I could list off names and events for days and still only give you the most surface level description of why New York probably is the most important city of our times. Economically, politically, culturally, it's truly unmatched from the UN headquarters to the stock exchange, Empire City, the original melting pot, Gotham, the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps. It does feel like it's the center of the universe. But the real power of New York is its people. Today, there are more than 20 million people living in New York. Who knows how many people have lived there since its founding? Billions, probably. I'm not a mathematician, clearly. New Yorkers are tough. They talk like it, they act like it, they live like it. Their blunt accent is proof that in America, we don't speak the Queen's English, and thank God for it. It's hard living, and not for the faint of heart. When I asked my friend why New York and New Yorkers have such a main character energy, she said, because we have to delude ourselves to live here. And that is the greatest answer I've ever received. Our guest tonight is Inez Stepman, a legal analyst for independent women and a resident of New York City. She is going to pop in to talk about the mayoral election, New York, what it means. And we want to hear from you. I know a lot of you have thoughts about this. Some of you have emailed me and told me that you were there for 9/11 or that you worked in it. And we want to hear it all. Nothing is off the table. What does New York mean to you? But first, some quick housekeeping. All right, if you want to be called on, you need to be on Zoom, on camera, and you need to virtually raise your hand by clicking the reactions button. If you aren't on Zoom and want to be a part of our virtual live audience right now or in the future, click the link in the description below to get the Zoom link, or just go to tway.tv/Bridget Zoom. The Zoom link is the same link every time. So once you register and sign up, save it somewhere, and it's always your virtual diner. The voice of God you're hearing is Cousin Maggie.
Hello, everyone.
Many of you already know her. She's my cousin and co-producer. We make a lot of other stuff together, like Dumpster Fire, Walk-ins Welcome, and all the other content you can find at Phetasy.com. Maggie is going to be monitoring the chat. If you have something to say and you raise your hand, Maggie will message you privately to find out what you'd like to talk about. She's going to make sure that we stay on topic. We can't guarantee we'll get to everybody, but we will do our best. And everyone knows my number one rule is don't be a dick. Although I might waive that since this is a New York episode. And in the spirit of New York, maybe be a little bit of a dick. Just enough of a dick that you would get by in New York. And now a word from our sponsor, Quest. I'm trying to make my health a priority, and that's why I love Quest. Quest simplifies the medical testing process significantly, especially if you're dealing with an HMO like I am. You don't have to wait weeks for an appointment to see the doctor and then get a referral and wait weeks more for an appointment with a specialist that you might need to see. Quest offers over 150 of the same tests trusted by doctors, including diagnostics for specific ailments like STDs, chronic conditions like heart, liver, and kidney disease, as well as testing that is almost never covered by health insurance like fertility and advanced women's hormone testing, like people like me and perimeno. Quest also offers broad packages of tests that go way beyond the standard tests you typically get in an annual medical checkup visit. Concierge medicine and functional medicine doctors charge thousands of dollars for these types of workups, and Quest offers them for the price of a night on the town. Your health and well-being is very well worth it. Visit questhealth.com and use the discount code RealMay25 to get 20% off your purchase. That's questhealth.com, code RealMay25 for 20% off. There's a link in the description below. All right, let's get to it. I want to hear from all of you, but first, let's bring in our guest, Inez Stepman. Oh, it's such a pleasure to speak to my brilliant friend.
It's such a pleasure to speak to my flattering friends.
Oh, how are you doing? How's New York?
It's good. Thank you for that lovely monologue. Honestly, on the right, you just hear so much crap being talked about New York all the time. And
Yes.
some of it, much of it accurate, but there's so many great things about the city. It is, by the way, I think one of the only so-called global cities, and by that I simply mean, cities that people around the world know. I mean, when my family visits Poland, where my parents are from, like people sell Yankees hats in Warsaw, right?
Yep.
It's known around the world, but unlike so many of the cities that are known around the world, I think New York really retained its American character versus, I don't know, like, for example, Milan, I find that it is sort of missing an Italian character. It really is like a global European city. Uh,
Mm.
I love the Americana of New York. I love the skyscrapers. I love the energy. It's something that either exhausts you and annoys you or energizes you and makes you like want to get up in the morning. And I'm definitely in the latter category. I do love this city. But that being said, we have a lot of problems and we're about to elect an idiot.
Do you think he's actually going to win?
I do. I mean, there's that bubble of hope that Cuomo will squeak it out, but it's just so depressing to vote for Andrew Cuomo as
Hmm.
well. So I myself,
Yeah.
on the fence, I am officially an undecided voter. I don't know if I'm going to feel good about my vote by voting for Sliwa, or I'm waiting till the last second. If I see a poll where Cuomo is, within a few points and might actually win, then, I'll bring my vomit bag or perhaps an entire vomitorium because he is as bad as he is better than Mondami.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem here is that he's so uninspiring. He's just and it's felt like this he didn't even, say what you will about Mamdani. I've seen a lot of the stuff that he's done for his campaign. He's young, he's got energy, he's creative. In many ways, he represents the spirit of kind of hustling and he did that cool like he just comes up with creative ways to campaign. He seems like he's out there knocking on doors and making an effort. And Cuomo, this is just from my experience of this from the outside, feels very entitled, like he doesn't have to make an effort, like he just kind of deserves this like weird establishment democratic mentality of just like I deserve this because I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, you just nailed it. As somebody who voted for Sliwa in the last election, supported Adams, I would have been much more comfortable voting for Adams. I wrote a column for Tablet basically saying Eric Adams is my mayor. I love him. I think he's been a great mayor, actually. I think he has a really good record on the things that actually matter. Like, first and foremost, crime has been getting better. It's so bad in New York, but it's much better than it was in 2022. And he had a good record on that. He's like, there are fewer rats in New York because he changed the garbage pickup schedule. Like, there's just like little quality of life things. He increased summons for the people going 30 miles an hour on e-bikes. That I'm way more worried about getting hit by one of those guys than I am about getting hit by a car.
Yeah.
Some pedestrians have a dance in New York. The e-bikes, especially driven by people who do not have driver's licenses and who last drove in Mumbai, um, they
Yeah.
they are a real hazard walking around. So like all these quality of life, like things that shouldn't be political. Nobody wants to get mugged on the subway. Nobody wants to sit next to a schizophrenic. Nobody wants to be beamed by someone going in the wrong direction on an e-bike at 30 miles an hour because we're actually living that walkable city dream that the left kind of spurgs about, right?
Mhm.
Nobody. You think those would be apolitical things. But in any case, you nailed it. I have barely gotten any campaign touches from Cuomo. I just got my first one today from some PAC that says like Sliwa can't win, vote for Cuomo. But this is the first text I've gotten for them. I've gotten harassed by Mondami canvassers every time I go to the park. I have gotten a ton of texts and mailers and stuff from Sliwa. Andrew Cuomo is not trying.
Yeah.
Big message is so out of touch. His major message is that Zohran has never had a job and doesn't know how to like run government. That's a benefit to most people who remember the tenure of Andrew Cuomo running the state. So
Right.
like it's all very out of touch, and it reminds me of the dynamic. A lot of it reminds me of the dynamic in 2016 in the Republican Party, where the more the establishment cries, the stronger the outsider gets. Um, in this case, the outsider is very, very dangerous, and I'm really not looking forward to his tenure as mayor. But unfortunately, my hope is dwindling that that's not what we're going to get. I'll put it that way.
What do you think is going on in New York City that has inspired so much enthusiasm for him?
Well, I think they're separate trends, but they combine into something that I think, really doesn't actually represent the city. So, people talk about New York as a very blue city. It's not that blue compared to other blue cities in America.
Hmm.
I came from DC and then I grew up on the West Coast. It is not as blue as San Francisco, as LA, as Portland, Seattle, definitely DC, Baltimore, like Boston, probably. I don't know less about their politics, so maybe I won't say, but like, I mean, other than Miami, I have a hard time imagining, or maybe like Houston, I have a hard time, or sorry, I don't know Texas politics very well, but like Dallas, I think is sort of red, right, purple.
It's pretty
There are a
blue.
few, yeah, but New York should not be the avatar for being the far left city in the way that some of these others are. And there's a few things that are still at least sane in New York. One is the NYPD, which is the best police force in the world and is much bigger than the police forces of other cities. I can't imagine in Washington, D.C., there being a parade the way that there was a few years ago when two cops got killed on the job, just shut down Fifth Avenue. Everybody comes out in their dress blues. Just politically, that would never happen in Washington, D.C. or Baltimore or San Francisco because the
Yeah.
cops, so it's so left wing that the cops don't have even any respect, even when they lose their lives on the job. It would be seen as too political or something for the mayor to head up, that kind of service and respect. That happens in New York. And the other big thing is we have the New York Post, which is not a niche political magazine like National Review or even the Wall Street Journal, but is it's a paper that you pick up in the bodega. It's a paper that ordinary people who are not plugged into politics read, and it means the crime gets covered in a way that it doesn't in other cities. So it's not that I'm denying that obviously it's a democratic city. Obviously it leans blue, but the conception of New York as being the avatar of that kind of far left city, I think is a little bit wrong around the edges. But in terms of why Zohran is popular, I think there's two things going on. One, of course, the less activist base. I called them at some point the master's class. It's sort of downwardly mobile 20s and 30s people who are mad that they're co-graduates from Bowdoin, where Zohran went, or one of those schools that is good, but maybe not Harvard and Yale. Their fellow classmates who studied, went into finance are doing a lot better and can afford a much nicer apartment in New York City than they can. So there's that activist class, and they're really revved up by the fact that Trump is president, right?
Yeah.
They've lost for the first time in their political memory, and they're really, really activated in a way that they just would not be if we had a different president. I love Trump. I voted for Trump. But I'm just saying that there is like that effect that he has, which really revs up the opposition.
Yeah.
The second piece of it is immigration. I don't know if you guys have seen the poll going on. Like if native born New Yorkers were voting, Cuomo would be running away with this race, meaning they're still Democrats, but they're not as far left as the base that's voting for Zohran. And there's about 10% of the city that's Muslim, and he really activates that base.
Mhm.
So those two combined are a really powerful combination that I'm very familiar with, actually, from California politics, where the immigrant vote there, it's slightly different, but like the immigrant vote there makes sure that it's a one-party state, i.e., that Democrats will always get elected. But the direction within the Democratic Party is not determined by, in California, Hispanic immigrants who are more sane. It's determined by activist people with master's degrees in San Francisco and LA. They are the ones who pick the primary guy, and then the primary guy wins because he has a D next to his name because of this big immigrant vote. So I think it's a somewhat similar dynamic in New York.
That's interesting to me though, because I mean, here in Texas and in a lot of the places, it's the immigrant vote is a lot of the times more conservative, especially Muslims, I would assume are usually voting more conservative.
I don't think that's true, even though I see where that would come from intellectually, but practically, I don't think that's true. And then in this
Mhm.
particular case, well, we could talk all night about the differences between Hispanics in Texas and Hispanics in California. Personally,
Right.
I think they're both different, actually like different kinds of families and nationalities in both cases, and then a very different political environment. That's contributed to the fact that California went one way and Texas is going the other, including the Hispanic vote in Texas.
Yeah.
But in the case of New York, I think uh, specifically, now I actually don't think that Zohran is a Islamist or that meme that's been going around, because I think he really wears his Muslim identity and religion as a kind of card in the intersectionality game.
Hmm.
He views it, in other words, very much like academic progressives and
Hmm.
much less like a serious committed Islamist. Um, That being said, a lot of serious committed Islamists who now reside in New York City are really happy to elect one of their own, quote unquote, meaning Muslim. And
Right.
you see that as a kind of cultural takeover. So I expect that turnout for him will be way higher than it would be for, I don't know, for any other Democratic nominee. And New York has always had ethnic politics, but this is a particularly kind of finger in the eye ethnic politics, considering, you know, Mondami took pictures hand in hand with the imam who was the unindicted co-conspirator in the 93 bombings. And it didn't even really come up in the
Yeah.
campaign, which is just shocking considering, you know, considering where the most major attack happened on 9/11, you would think
Yeah.
that it might be a small issue in a campaign. The fact that the leading candidate for mayor is just like buddy buddy with the unindicted co-conspirator from 93.
Yeah, that's what's been really surprising to me too. If you had told me this in 2001, that I would be kind of shocked that people are just able to overlook it, but perhaps it's because 9/11, and it seems it was such a scar for everybody there, and even, like, somebody who's sober, I go to meetings there, and almost still every share or people who are talking about it, like, that was a pivotal moment in people's recovery and their addiction. It was, like, when they either spiraled out of control or got their shit together or whatever. It still is so much comes up regularly, I think, in New York. It's not like maybe the younger people don't know. Is it just a generation is forgetting? I don't that was really surprising to me that
It,
he
it
has
was
this.
surprising. It was surprising to me too, especially the fact that it wasn't used as a cudgel. Right.
Right.
And I do think this is about the dynamic between Cuomo and the Democratic establishment and their progressive base more than anything else. I mean, obviously, Sliwa has brought it up, but nobody cares what Sliwa says in New York City. So, especially among the media class. So I watched both of the mayoral debates, and you know, the media like figures who the local media figures who were asking the questions, they didn't think that this was worthwhile. And interestingly, Cuomo did have the opportunity. They had a cross-examination question at the last debate where each person got to choose one of their opponents to ask a question of, which is and I actually like that format, right? It
Uh-huh.
allows each person to bring up whatever hit point they want to, right? And Cuomo chose, yes, to talk about somebody that Mondami had taken a picture with, but did not talk about the 93 co-conspirator. Instead, decided to ask him and hit him on taking a picture with some Ugandan politician who apparently in Uganda is in favor of locking up gays and transgenders for being gay, right? Okay.
Right.
Like that's the angle he decided to take. And he's really clearly decided to go after progressives, which I mean, I just think is a mistake. The even within New York City, the number one issue that people keep bringing up that they're worried about Mondami on is crime and safety.
Right.
And the problem is Andrew Cuomo can't run a campaign on crime and safety because he signed the bail reform that is causing, you know, judges to let out people who have 57 priors and stab somebody
Right.
on the subway. That's not the mayor, actually. That's Albany. And Andrew Cuomo, his name is all over all of that stuff. So he's stuck with this lame talking point about Mondami being too young and too much of an outsider, which I feel like is just playing right into Mondami's hands,
W-
honestly.
What's your biggest fear? Because a lot of people are saying that he's just kind of a young De Blasio, he won't be any worse than De Blasio was.
I think he's going to be worse than De Blasio because I think he's a true believer. De Blasio was a little bit of a wheeler and dealer. I like my politicians corrupt when they don't agree with me. I like non-corrupt Republicans and corrupt Democrats because I think it's better to have somebody who's very like pragmatic in the city and making deals with people in the back rooms oftentimes. Um, then it like that kind of machine democratic politics is often saner than the true believer
Right.
progressives. Um, but I think he's going to be worse, and I think the issue on which he's going to be the worst is, and immediately so, is public safety. The
And
day
and
he's elected, a bunch of cops are going to resign. They're not going to be replaced. Nobody wants to be the cop who had to shoot a black perp who was running at them with a knife under the Mondami administration. They are going to get out. They're on the edge of resigning anyway. The force is already understaffed. So a bunch of people are going to resign right away. And Mondami can do some things right away, just, with the stroke of a pen. He can pull the cops out of the subways, for example, where Eric Adams has had them show up in as much force as possible, with a force that is like half of them are working overtime every single week, right? So I'm really worried about the immediate effect on public safety. And I think there will be one, because New York has not, it was really bad. It was going on a really bad trajectory. It pulled up a little bit in 2022 because of some of the changes in policy from the mayor, who has to fight Albany and has to fight, absolutely crazy city council. So can't do everything that he wants to do, but at least having the mayor who wanted to put the cops in the subways and wants to support the police and wants to not use them as a political cudgel in, I don't know, racial reckoning or whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, that has made a big difference in New York. And I really feel I'm afraid of that domino being pulled out, because I think it'll go directly back downhill. It's so easy to go downhill, and it's so difficult to build up public safety in a city of, whatever it is, 8.5, 9 million people.
Yeah, it did seem like it was getting pretty bad, and then it seemed like it's getting better. Like you said, just the appearance and feel of it and the times that I've been there. And now, if I keep hearing a lot of people saying they're gonna leave, but are they gonna leave? Is real estate gonna take a dive? Is it a lot of just fear mongering? What do you think? Why do you think people are kind of so, aside from just like the good old culture war, you have AOC and Bernie, campaigning with him. Why do you think people are so uh obsessed with this from the national perspective? Because I know a lot of people are like, I don't care. I don't have to live there. They get what they deserve. But it does seem like there's a big fascination.
I I think it's because it's so clearly the direction that a large part of the progressive base wants the Democratic Party to go post election of Donald Trump. I think, fortunately, he can't run for president, right? He was born outside. Otherwise, I think he would be a very serious presidential candidate if he wins, right? Because I think it really does represent the direction of the Democratic Party, and in that sense, there is national interest in this race, even though everyone understands that the electorate in America doesn't look like the electorate in New York. Um, I think there's a part of the base of the Democratic Party that desperately wants their representatives to quote unquote do something. I think that's why we're still in a government shutdown. They're not really clear on what they want that something to be,
Right.
but they are just furious because I really think they think of themselves as what is it Obama called it, the coalition of the ascendant,
Hmm.
um, the right side of history. They're shocked that there's a change in the directionality of politics. They're shocked by the vibe shift. They've never been on the other side of it. And by never, I mean going back 60 years. I'm not saying the
Yeah.
right has won no specific political battles and they've won elections, but that trajectory of the culture and the institutions has gone one way. It's been a one-way ratchet for 60, 75 years. And so
Yeah.
I think they are furious. They never thought that this could ever happen. And so I do think Mondami is representative of the direction that they want to go. So in that sense, I do think it's nationally relevant. The other thing about people leaving, look, everybody always says they're going to leave New York.
Or America.
Sometimes they do, but it usually let fewer people than say they will. There isn't really anything like New York in America, and if you like that aspect, like we were talking about in the beginning of this, there's not really a lot of places for you to go if you value a bunch of the things that New York has. Um, that being said, I could see quite, especially if New Jersey goes politically in a different direction. Like, there's basically a tied race there for governor. Um, right now, I could see a lot of people moving across the river. It's very much like DC, where you don't have to live in the jurisdiction of New York City. You can live just outside of it or just across the river in Jersey. Those places have been, really what's keeping people out of those places is that they think it's not cool. But if a, critical mass of people move over, I could see, Jersey really benefiting from that. The other thing is it's changing the state level politics. The rest of the state is so terrified of Mandami that the Republican candidate or presumptive Republican candidate, Elise Stefanik, for governor, actually is right now is polling tide.
Wow.
Again, it's not as deep. Believe me, I know deep blue. I came from California. Okay, like
Yeah.
I know deep blue, but it's not nearly as deep blue as that. It's both New Jersey and New York governor's races are going to be squeakers.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. It does seem like so many young people are into it too. And I do wonder about just the cool factor. He's just cool and they're young and I don't know. There does seem to be a lot of resentment in Gen Z just in general. Like, not being able to get the jobs because they're being replaced by AI. They haven't had a I mean, they've had a couple of bad breaks. So they had COVID. Do you feel that there? Or again, is this something that just I is a perception I have of the whole generation in at large?
I think a few things. One, I I just acknowledge that people think that this guy is cool, but I just can't see it. He's so transparently smarmy to me that I just I accept that this is I'll accept it as a fact of politics, but I just don't concede it because he seems so dorky and smarmy to me. And also, I disagree with the framing about Gen Z. I think he is quintessentially millennial, and I think a lot of the enthusiasm for him comes from millennials. In other words, I guess we're still technically young, a little younger, but I don't think the enthusiasm is coming from 23-year-olds. I think the enthusiasm is coming from 33-year-olds who are
Mm,
not in the place in life that they think they deserve.
right,
I some places, some magazines have framed it as the like the haves against the have mores.
right,
I have seen some breakdowns where if you once you get over 400K a year in New York, it flips back to Cuomo, but that
mm,
Zohran is dominating that New York City version of middle class, right? We're from,
yeah,
75 or 100 to 400. Um,
right,
and so it's that class that is, and again, I think there's a very specific type of person, which is by no means the only kind of Zohran voter, but it is over and over again the type of people I see canvassing for him, the type of people making videos for him, the type of people like just that you see as the most enthusiastic voters. And they are overeducated. They're people who chose careers in activism or philanthropic quote unquote endeavors, and they're making good money. And I know because I work for a conservative think tank, right? So I get it. Like I can't afford the things that my friends who went to big law can do.
right.
And I just accept this as part of the trade-off of having a job that I love, doing something that I believe. Um, but the entire ethos of those leftists, especially those kinds of leftists, is against the idea of trade-offs.
Yeah.
Right? It's I am the creme de la creme. Plus, I have the right ideas, and I'm a more moral person than everybody else, especially people who went into finance or something like that, right?
Mm,
And yet, my apartment is some like walk up in Bushwick, and the guys I graduated with who wear those zip up vests, and they live in Murray Hill, and they have like 2 bedrooms with great light, and they have the whole shebang, or maybe they live in the West Village in a nice apartment, right? I really think it's class envy, but it's class envy of a very particular, overeducated, entitled type. And
yeah.
it's combined with that ethos of, it's class envy plus the idea that making money is evil. It's just like a very weird, toxic stew of psychology, I think. But
It's
I really think that's the activist class that really has come out for Sofran, has walked precincts for Sofran, the ones that put the big signs in their, in their like brownstones and stuff. It really is that class of people that is most excited about him. And there is a very particular profile, and it does
yeah.
have to do with envy.
It's so fascinating to me. We have a
Entitlement
couple.
and envy.
Yeah, that's what it feels. That's always like the weird. It's like a unearned entitlement that's very fascinating to me. We have some hands raised, so we'll take some comments or questions or whatever if you don't mind. If you have to go, you can, but we'll hear from some people. Who's our first guest?
All right, first I'm going to bring up Haley.
And feel free to jump in.
Asking you to unmute there, Haley.
Hi.
Hi.
Bridget, I'm a huge, huge fan. I love you very much. So thank you for this.
Of course.
So I am New York City voter. I live in Queens, near like Rockaway Beach area, which is very conservative compared to like the rest of New York City. I'm also, full disclosure, I've kind of lived like a bunch of different places. I've been born and raised New Yorker, but I recently moved back this year. I also lived like half my life in Israel. So I'm probably the one community that it's not so gung-ho about Zoran. This is probably like, speaking for a lot of my fellow Jews, I would say, here in New York. But I agree with so much of what you both have said. But like I do want to just push back on like the I don't necessarily think Zoran is an Islamist. I don't think he, would get to this point if there was like serious, positions that he's taken about like 9/11 and things like that and be able to be mayor. I do think, however, that his anti I'm going to say for myself anti-Semitism because I truly believe, and especially the last few days with more clips of his past statements coming out, that he truly, truly, I don't know if he would say that he doesn't like the Jews, but I think like he'd prefer we weren't there. Like he prefer we didn't have to deal with the issues that he's dealing with. Um, I don't care so much about his positions on Israel because he can't really do much. He's just the mayor of New York. I have a very strong worry because like you both have said that his biggest weakness, I think, is crime and all of that aspect, crime and policing and things like that.
He's going to turbocharge those protests. I already know what
Not
you're
just
going
the
to say.
protests, all of the
100%
attacks, like
yes.
the anti-Semitic attacks. That's where I think our community is really worried. Like, just the people are going to, I would say the protests less like because everybody's protests for everything these days, just like it's the biggest fad in the world. But I would say like the attacking Jews in the streets, like the anti-Semitic slurs you hear just walking, across Manhattan these days. There was attack like yesterday on an Israeli
Yeah.
tourist,
To
something
be
like that.
clear, for people outside of New York City, these are not like polite protests where people are walking down the street. They shut down Grand Central like a month ago. They're banging on the walls. There've been attacks against, Jewish restaurants.
Hmm.
Like and obviously there's an ongoing problem especially in Hasidic Brooklyn with but I think these are
Absolutely.
like are separate issues, like mostly, frankly, like mostly black criminals hitting Jews on the back of the head, like
True.
on the street. So there is a very real issue, and I think that Zohran is. I agree with you completely that
Like
Zohran's.
that's what I think people are like always talking about his anti-Israel like stance. It's like, okay, fine, half the country thinks this way about Israel these days, but the issue is he's going to be in charge of taking care of all the citizens of New York. And
Hmm.
now, as we've seen in places like London with their two-tier policing, I mean, that's the big worry is that now it's all just going to come to New York City. And
Uh,
this is what's going to happen in the streets now. Like we're going to now look at criminals differently because, it's such a big worry. It's something that I worry about every day living here. And I know that a lot of people in my community do
can
too.
isn't it true though that like 40% of Jews are voting for him? Is
That's
there
the latest poll. And that's a different problem in and of itself.
mm,
That is,
I
I
got something to
think
add about that. So
actually,
there's been a few polls, and it has not matched my experience. So I've just been sort of shocked. So there's been a bunch of polls that have shown basically that the Jewish vote in New York, which by the way is about equal to the Muslim vote now in
mhm,
New York. We think of New York as like the most heavily Jewish city. You mentioned Woody Allen, right? In the run up,
yeah.
but he's quintessentially Jewish in New York. Perhaps to our detriment here. But I I've seen a bunch of those polls that show something like 40% and show basically a plurality of voters, which the Jewish voters of New York are Democrats. They're heavily Democrats, but it's basically shown that it's not moving. They're voting like other
True.
Democrats, that it's not really moving the needle in terms of like his
And
rhetoric
what I
of
think,
lies intifada. And I don't believe, first of all, I just don't believe that. I just, from observation, I don't believe that. And it's not that there aren't plenty of Jews who were coming out for Zohran.
for
But
sure. And I
I
also just think that if
yeah.
October 7th never happened, for example, I think that number would be so much higher. And I honestly
I
don't
sense a
think,
shift. And
yeah,
there was a poll that came out from Patriot Polling, which I have no idea. They have no history of polling, especially in New York. But they're the ones who actually asked the question about native born or not, for example.
Right.
That I cited earlier. They also had a really interesting crosstab of religions, and they showed that Cuomo was like substantially ahead in the Jewish vote. It was something like 60 to 30, and then the number of Republican Jews in New York is minuscule, obviously. Um, but it showed like a very strong majority for Cuomo, and that matches more with my observation, which is that there's about a third of Jews in New York that are like just can't wait to go out for Sofran, and then that the majority of Jews are at least hesitant, and so we'll see what the actual numbers look on election day.
I think it's going to be less. I honestly do.
Yeah.
Like I have something in me is just, I can't, 40% of Jews in New York, I just can't believe are going to vote for him. 30 sounds
first of all, we're
more.
talking about between a third and 40%, but the point is that in some of those polls, it doesn't seem that different from Democrats overall, and that Mamdani is winning the plurality. The poll that the Patriot Polling came out with saw like basically there's twice as many Jews voting for Cuomo
Yeah.
as would for Zohran. So we'll see what it actually turns out as. I do think that's an issue. I definitely, specifically the protests and the turbocharge stuff, about whether or not he's an Islamist. I want to be really clear. I'm not disavowing the idea that he's an Islamist because I'm scared that it's politically incorrect, like a lot of people seem to think. I simply, when I read, for example, his father's scholarship,
They don't know you.
yeah, when I read his father's scholarship, I think he's actually an academic anti-colonialist.
Right.
I don't think that he's actually very religious. I don't think that he's going to usher in Sharia law. I don't think he has any of those inclinations, simply because I don't think that's the direction. What I think he is anti-Semitic, and more importantly, anti-Western. I think he believes the same things that that academic branch believes, that anti-colonialist branch believes about both America and Israel, that we're both settlers.
100%.
Right.
100% agree.
Everything that we have built in the West has been built on the backs of the global South, of and of stealing their resources and abusing their labor. Sorry, my baby's crying. I hope you can't hear that. I just think his mode of thought is not Islamist. I think he's unfortunately something that's very common more in our university track. I do think that he has very little allegiance to America. He became a citizen 2 years before he ran for office, like a year and a half before he ran for office. He obviously became a citizen just to run for office.
Yeah.
His picture says that he's not an American, right? I think he does not have an attachment to this country. I do think he's sort of a global floating class. In his case, his dad's an academic, his mom's a film director, right?
Yep.
This global elite class that floats between cities of the world. I don't think he has any particular love for New York City, and I don't think he has any particular love for America. And it is very disappointing that people would consider electing someone who has so little actual ties to the country that he's trying to hold office in. And it's not to say that I think that immigrants, for example, can't be wonderful politicians in America, but immigrants who love this country and have like dedicated decades of their lives to assimilating and becoming part of this country. He hasn't. He's lived,
Yep.
he says he's lived in Queens or whatever, Yeah, on and off, like among many great cities of the world, and never bothered to get citizenship even because it wasn't necessary for his globe-trotting life. He didn't need citizenship in America. But
Such a good point. I didn't know it was
office, so
only
he went ahead
two
and did it.
years before he
They see it
started
as
running.
creative.
And
You
that's
can
like obvious to everybody. Like that's
yeah.
I
great
didn't.
point.
Where did he come from? Is he like DSA? Is that who? Where? How do they just like? I don't understand the mechanisms that get the people like him to just all of a sudden pop up out of nowhere and have all this momentum and have a splashy graphics and like a pretty. It seems like a pretty well organized campaign. Is this just the activist class in motion here? I've never obviously volunteered on any campaign.
Makes you less quirky than me. No, there was an interesting piece that came out on Fox News about the funding from his campaign and the structures behind it, which I recommend reading. But in terms of the structure of the DSA, I actually like the way that voting works in New York, other than the ranked choice voting, which I don't like. But you can uh, you can be essentially, if you're a third party, you can claim the candidate of the major party as your own. And then when people vote, you have multiple choices. So when we voted last time for Sliwa, you could vote for him as a Republican, or you can vote for him as a member of the Conservative Party, which is more to the right of the Republican Party in New York, right? And it's a good way to allow third parties to flourish without being a spoiler.
Right.
Where people can, because what the difference between voting in those two ways is that one way you're recorded as a Conservative Party voter. And so when they make a certain threshold, then they're like, they get all these benefits of being a legitimate party and they get automatic ballot access, et cetera, right? So I think it's a good way of allowing some third parties to flourish and inject their ideas. That being said, of course, the shoe goes on the other foot. The DSA is probably the most powerful of those third parties, and I'm sure that they're claiming Zohran as their candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Some years they might not. If the Democratic Party goes with somebody who is sane, they probably don't want to claim him, right? But
Right.
they have that option, and it allows third parties to act without. So that's the
Oh, okay.
relationship between the third parties and like DSA. But he was heavily involved in the DSA. That's where a lot of this the speeches and the stuff that he said is coming out from his DSA conferences, and they elected AOC too. So there are people who are frustrated with the Democratic Party from the left. And again, I see a lot of the same dynamics as the Republican Party in 2015 and 2016.
I read something that people are afraid that he'll be a great mayor. Like conservatives are worried that he'll be great.
Look, if he wants to expand policing in New York City, great, but I just don't think he's going to do it. I think he's a true believer. I think a lot of the dancing away from his past positions he's done as a purely political matter, and that was the entire last debate. He was jello to the wall. He would not say anything other than the word affordability.
Yeah. But he is, to this point, he is the only politician I have heard at any point recently talking about the cost of living, which hasn't really improved under even the Trump administration, from what I can tell, just from people anecdotally. Again, I don't know what the numbers look like, but it does seem like the cost of living is still running away from people.
I mean, I think there are structural problems, but I do think there's been quite a difference. I mean, I just know with groceries, there's been quite a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point, the eggs in my bodega, which I don't shop in for eggs because they're expensive, so bear that in mind, because it's like a little cornered market.
Yeah.
But at one point, they hit $18 for a dozen eggs. Okay, right now, it's like $7. Okay, so
Right.
that's come down. I think first of all, I just don't agree that, I mean, every politician in New York City talks about affordability, and it's
Okay.
obvious, it's just so fantastically, exceptionally expensive to live here. I know that there are affordability problems in a lot of places in America, but here it's especially bad, and the cost of housing is the number one problem. So I don't
Yeah.
agree that other politicians haven't talked about it. I mean, every politician here talks about it. The question is, what they think is to be done about it.
Mm,
The second thing is there are real, I'll agree with with Charlie Kirk here and say that there is a real long-term structural problem with affordability, specifically of housing, of healthcare, of childcare, and what was the last bucket, and of a higher ed, right?
yeah.
Each one of these things, and there are people who want to sort of how do you say it? Just be a little dissemble about that by saying that, flat screen TVs are a lot cheaper, your phone's a lot cheaper, your internet's cheaper, right? You have a bunch of gadgets that will be cheaper, and that's all true. Consumer products have gotten cheaper over time, but the staples of middle class life got massively more expensive.
Oh, yeah.
But that is not something. I do think that's something that's going to be a major pain point in our politics. I think it's a large part of Zohran's appeal. Um,
Mhm.
specifically in New York, but I think that is a national thing. And I
Yeah.
think we need to come up with, I will note that none of those sectors, by the way, are what we would call free market, however, right? Every
Yeah.
single one of those sectors is heavily regulated and heavily subsidized. Um, so what the solutions are, we need to have a conversation about, but I do think that those are the middle class pain points that are popping up over and over again and will continue to pop up over and over again in our politics. That being said, I want to push back against the idea that Zohran ran this totally economic campaign. Yes, for the last 4 weeks, he's been saying affordability and nothing else, because everything else that he said has been so unpopular in a certain way, even in blue New York, that the most popular piece of his platform, yes, like all politicians, he wants to repeat the most popular part of his platform over and over again. But the idea that he's a post-woke leftist candidate, which I've seen for both the left and the right, just doesn't survive contact with actually being here and hearing his advertising. I mean, one of the things he ran on in the primary was sending $65 million of taxpayer money to gender change surgery.
Yeah.
Okay. He's not been shying away from cultural issues. He puts identity politics front and center. He said he's going to tax the white neighborhoods more because they deserve to be taxed more. Okay. Like, he is not an anti-DEI, anti-woke candidate. He agrees with all of that stuff. All right. It's the same reason that he was so super into defund the police, which last time I checked is not really an economic position. You don't want to defund the police because you want to save the dollars, right? You
Yeah.
want to defund the police because you don't believe in the concept of policing, or that people who commit crimes should go to the jail. You think that everybody who commits crimes is just like, acting out their bad childhood. Okay.
Right.
So I want to push back a little bit against the idea that, yes, this is the most popular part of his platform. It's popular for good reason. I do think the right has to take seriously these questions, or we are just going to continue to lose. If the average 30-year-old thinks he will never.
Even more so recently, because of exactly that, messaging is resonating with people who feel that pain point that you're describing. Because it wasn't really until recently that it just like popped into, and it was really when he did start saying affordability that I feel like that those people are now they're like, I can relate to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the most popular part of his platform. I've seen, especially actually, I guess on the right, I've seen a few people write pieces. This is going to be the shape of the left that's actually going to win, right? And the right has to understand the populist leftist economics are popular. And I agree actually with a large part of that thesis. I think Zohran's a really bad example of it. He is not post woke. Okay. He is the most woke.
Yeah.
He just is focusing on the most popular part of his platform, which is why he's talking affordability. But name a single issue where he is on the other side or even neutral. So name a single cultural issue. He's not.
Yeah.
He's on the far left of every single cultural issue that there is. He doesn't believe that men and women are, physically different. Okay. He believes that we should throw in a ton of taxpayer money in order to keep illegal migrants in the city, right? He thinks that the police are an oppressive, and this is an interesting one, anti-queer institution, right? Like, he poses with drag queens. There's no there's no reality to the idea that he doesn't embrace the hard left on cultural issues. He embraces the hard left on every cultural issue. He
Interesting.
just centers, quote unquote, okay, um, he centers to some extent the most popular piece of his platform, which is economics. And that
Um,
itself is kind of scary because this is not his economic platform is not something reasonable like, oh, hey, like we need to start coming up with solutions for people who are really economically struggling. It's let's open state-run grocery stores. So, I mean, his economics are also extremely far left, but I don't know. I'm just pushing back because I feel like there's this meme online that he is the post woke economics only candidate, that he doesn't care about anything other than affordability and economics. And I think
yeah,
that is honestly right into what he wants people to write about him. But I don't think it's true.
yeah,
Based on the ground, I just don't think it's true. It's not, his canvassers are talking about trans rights. Okay.
yeah. Thank you, Haley.
Thank
We have
you,
one
Haley.
more
Thank
hand
you, guys.
raised.
Yes.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Oh, wait. Oh, all right.
And
I'm going to bring
then
up
we will
Kelly.
wrap it up so Inez can get to her potatoes.
Hi, Kelly. Oh, we need you to unmute. She's trying. There we go.
Okay. I got myself unmuted. Hi. So,
Hi.
I was, I made a prediction to my husband a couple weeks ago that I said to him that I just don't think that Fox is going to stay in New York if Mandami is elected. And it made me start thinking, I was curious how long Inez thought that that corporation offices, that businesses will just start leaving New York, because I know it's the financial capital of the world, but at the same time, corporation offices, businesses, all those things, they can go anywhere at any time and still do business with anyone. So I'm just wondering if it's going to be like when everyone started working online and Californians could move to Florida or Texas all of a sudden. Is it going to be like that where just in the first year everybody's just gonna cut and run?
I don't think they'll leave. I mean, I can't imagine. It's still like the center of media, but I would love to know what Inez thinks.
Look, I don't know. Even Newsmax has their headquarters here in New York.
Yeah.
The two centers of media are in DC and New York, and DC is no better in terms of policy. And so I kind of doubt that media will cut and run. Other kind of corporate interests. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't think they're going to move randomly across the country because it's really hard to shift talent across the country in that kind of one and done move. And it's what's kept California in business for so long, right? It took decades before the exodus really even made a dent. And even so, I mean, judging
Even
by housing prices, people still want to live in California. So
yeah.
I
And
just think
people are
there's so
going
much,
back.
yeah, people are going back.
People are going back.
Yeah, that's scary.
My in-laws still live in California. Good luck.
You just can't. It's the weather. Like
Yeah, I mean,
you come from
California
that
has nothing.
weather and you
If
move to
California
like
had the weather of Detroit, it would look worse than Detroit. Everybody would
yeah,
yesterday.
yeah. It's the weather. It's a
But
cult of the weather.
but that being said, could I see, for example, especially if New Jersey gets a Republican governor and starts cutting some corporate taxes, could I see a move across the river where people don't really have to move, right? You can still live in New York, you still have the same talent pool, you still have, it's the same issue DC has where everybody just moved across the river into Virginia during COVID. Yeah, I could see it because within the tri-state area, if there's some real competition in terms of the taxes offered, in terms of the economic incentives, I could see people starting to move across the river. Yeah. In a way that has not happened, like I said, almost for purely kind of vibes reasons.
Yeah.
I think that at some point the economic incentives will overcome the vibes. And
Interesting.
So I don't know. That's just, I don't know. It might be totally wrong. It might be a prediction, but especially with the more people working remote, especially if there is a real choice in policies, because right now there isn't.
Hmm.
So why would you move to New Jersey? Why would you either have to move wholly out of the area, which has all kinds of opportunity costs, or you have to stay. But if there becomes a real choice between Mondami, New York, and basically like red New Jersey, I do think that a lot of corporations are going to start, thinking, well, maybe we'll just like get a much cheaper building in Jersey City, which is technically in a red jurisdiction, and we'll pay massively less taxes. And we will be outside of Mondami's jurisdiction. He won't be able to make us the kulaks of his revolution. I I think that's a much more realistic proposition than a bunch of the like finance capital uprooting and going to Austin or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, it's not happening. I keep telling my husband, I'm like, we're gonna have to move to New York, aren't we? He's like, no, he's never even been, but
All right. Thanks, Kelly.
You should move to New York so you're here with me.
I know. I know. There's it because I was born there, there is always that like weird homing device. Thank you, Kelly. There's that always weird like I want it like ET phone home. I always feel drawn there when I was a kid. That was my dream to like be a novelist and live in New York or be on Broadway, and I don't know, those like core things die hard, and yeah, there's
I should
still
disclose, like we ourselves are thinking about getting out just outside. I'm not like leaving,
yeah.
but we're thinking about getting outside the city limits.
Yeah. How
There's
come?
a few different options, but I love the city. I really like I love this city. But if it becomes too dangerous to take the
Yeah.
subway, it's a problem.
Where would you go? Like Connecticut?
No, we're looking at like a little bit up the Hudson or
Oh,
like
got it.
across the river or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
nothing is certain, but I thought I would be here. Honestly, I thought I would be here. Like I want to grow old here. I love
Yeah.
the energy of the city. I love raising a child in the city, which you don't hear often. But
Yep.
there is already, we're on the cusp of all of these crime problems, and it could tip either way.
Yep.
And one thing I'm not going to tolerate is being afraid to walk down the street.
Well, that's why my parents left. Was
Yeah,
it,
you
it
lose
was
everything that's
1980?
good about the city, right? Like if you
Yeah, it was
walk
crazy there.
to your dinner or walk to a show or walk to, if you can't walk around after the sun goes down without fearing you're going to be mugged, like you lose access to everything that makes the city wonderful.
Yeah. And it changes those, like I found, this is why I left LA. Those the cost benefit analysis changes when you have a kid, because suddenly now it's not just you worrying about yourself. You're like, oh, what if this crazy person turns and comes after me, and now I've got to take my kid and fit, like it just
You're much less
changes.
mobile, right? Like I think
What?
all the time you're much less like I was much less afraid when I didn't have a kid.
Oh,
Not
totally.
because I don't want to be stabbed. Obviously, I didn't want to be stabbed before then, but you're just much more mobile.
Yeah.
I can jump, I can move cars, I can like,
Yeah.
I can put my head on a swivel, and I can kind of be situationally aware and get myself in and out of trouble. It's much harder if you have a kid, but I mean, there are so many great things for kids in the city too. I mean,
know.
there are so many great opportunities, especially since we plan on homeschooling. It like the social stuff is great. All of the classes that are available, all of the neighborhood stuff that's available, the
The
parks,
museums.
like museums, and there's so
Yep.
much here. I love this city. I don't want to see it go to shit. I am about as far right as it comes, and I get frustrated with the anti-urbanism of the right. New York City is a flagship city of the United States.
Yeah.
People look at New York and they think that's America. Now, I know how much that offends people on the right. I get it, because actually the real heart of America is not in New York, right?
Right.
But it represents us to the world. And like, it's such an American city, and it has an Art Deco skyline. Like it's just finance. It has a beating heart. Like we should not be proud of retreating from New York City. Like I understand, I told you, I'm thinking about it myself. I understand that we may have to at some point, and I'm not judging people for leaving. I hate that like rhetoric, like just get out, just retreat.
I
Okay.
know.
retreat from all the best real estate in America, like retreat from the beautiful coastline of California, and retreat from the beating heart of American finance with the Art Deco skyline, like
Yeah.
retreat from all of these places that people think of as emblematic of America. That's not a victory, my friends. That is called losing, and it sucks.
That's also, I've been reading Selena Zito's Butler book, and she is really just so brilliant in talking about having a sense of place. And New Yorkers have that sense of
There are
place.
somewheres here in her language, right? There are somewheres. It's not just the nowheres. There are a lot of nowheres. Mondami's a nowhere, but there are still a lot of somewheres in New York.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been, I know, I love that city so much. I went there, so I was driving it. My husband's never been. I can't wait to take him, but he's such a born and raised Los Angeles, but also like concerned. He's just like, I would hate that shithole. He's also not an extrovert. And I get like powered up from New York City. I get so much energy from the city, from all the people. And I can see
My
being an
husband and I
introvert.
are the same way. He's like, he needs his books and his like
Yes, quiet.
quiet.
And
And I'm like, I get so much more done here. I'm so much happier and energized here.
yeah,
I like that. I like fighting my way through throngs of people.
yeah.
It's not for
And he
everyone. It
hates
is
it.
truly not for everyone. I'm not trying to like say that everybody, must like this or something. I perfectly understand why people like quiet in the suburbs, and especially like beautiful rural places. And I understand why people prefer that life. But
And they like guns.
if you like the high tempo life, there is
Yeah.
nowhere like New York.
Yeah, I went and I was driving in and I was like all dirty and just New York. And I was like, oh, yeah, I don't know why anyone would live here. And literally like 3 hours later, I was like, I want to move here. It's like dancing in Brooklyn. I'm like, I love this city so much. So, yeah, it took all of like 3 hours for me to tap back into my roots there and my love of that city. And I'm with you. I don't think this is one of the things that I always wish that conservatives, now that they're kind of cool, would understand. Cool for a minute. I think it might be a one-hit wonder. Would understand is just I was at this big event and it was all, culture war stuff and people were debating. And then that night I went back to my hotel in Brooklyn and they had a pop-up DJ and everybody was just getting down and it was super fun and all, just completely diverse and amazing vibes and people were smiling and I'm like this, like we need this too. We need the arts, we need the dancing and the culture and it can't all just be like culture warring all the time and sometimes I feel like that is really the something that the right lacks is like the fun cool part of culture, the art and
I do think it's changing somewhat,
it
especially
is.
because the youth vote is changing. So I think a lot
Yeah.
of dynamism, I always have trouble with that word, um, comes from just simply being young.
Yeah.
And at least hopefully age brings wisdom, but youth brings coolness, right? There you can't duplicate that. I'm like pushing 40, have a kid, like
Yeah.
you can't truly be cool.
No.
Um,
I was never cool.
yeah, I mean, it's not like I was losing out on anything to begin with, but
Well, thank you.
I do think there's a burgeoning right wing art scene here. There's a lot. Like
Interesting.
I just I agree with you. The right is undervalued, all of those things. And then even when they do play in it, they play in it in such a kind of didactic way. It's almost
Yeah.
as bad as the left, right? It's like we need right wing art.
Yeah.
And it always comes out like crap. But I do like that there are new publishing companies. I think especially in the writing space and then the fiction writing space, there's some good movement happening. There's I have a favorite sculptor online who's like super
Oh.
wing, doing some really modernist kind of both an echo of the 20s and I guess I should say the 1920s these days. Echo of the 20s, but also like very modernist, very, very forward looking. I think the right so often falls into just repeating
Yeah.
like they think what's good is copying what happened before, which is not It's just not, that's not how art works. You know, you can't just like make the same thing 50,000 times throughout
Yeah.
imagine. Anyway,
Thank you.
now, so, and I do have to see to my potatoes.
Okay. Where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter, X. I still hang on to calling it Twitter. You can find me at Inez Step. You can type in Inez Steppen, or you can. My actual handle is Inez Felcher. You can't change your @ handle without
know.
consternation. So that's my pre-married name.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your time. And hopefully I'll be in New York soon.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know. We'll toast to the end of New York.
It's not the end. That's the one thing I do know about New York is that it's resilient.
Maybe.
It's like a cockroach or a bed bug. Makes up that city.
So
You must
true.
tap into that energy. All right. Have a good night. Enjoy the potatoes.
All right.
Thank you all for being here. And thank you to my guest, Inez Stepman. Thank you to those of you who showed up and asked questions. I love these conversations so much. So thank you to 2A and their amazing team. Thank you to Quest for sponsoring this show, and visit questhealth.com. Use the discount code RealMade25 and get 20% off your purchase. That's questhealth.com, code RealMade25 for 20% off. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Bridget.
Join us next Wednesday, November 5th. If all goes as planned, we will have the great Lenore Skenazy on to talk about free range parenting. So that will be a good one at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you're with us on the Zoom, it's the same link every time. Thank you guys for getting real with me. I'm Bridget Phetasy. Don't forget to tip your server.